The dowager arrived at her son's wedding and curtsied to the kitchen girl. I knew the jewels before I knew the woman wearing them. I was carrying a coal-scuttle through the long gallery at Cranleigh when the bride came down the stairs in them, and I stopped. A housemaid does not stop. A housemaid is furniture that walks, but I stopped. Because around Lady Cecilia Stannard's throat lay the sapphires of the House of Adlerstein, and the last hand to fasten that clasp had been my mother's. I knew the setting. I knew the small flaw in the third stone, a star-shaped occlusion my grandmother used to say was a real star the jeweller had caught and could not let go. I knew that the centre pendant unhooked to be worn alone, and that there had been a ring to match it. A single sapphire in old gold, engraved inside the band with the words my mother had pressed to my child's mouth the last night I ever saw her. I knew the parure the way you know your own name in the dark. I knew it because it was mine. My hand went, of itself, to the cord at my throat, under the grey stuff of my dress, where the ring had hung for 11 years against my skin, where no one could take it. Then Lady Cecilia swept past me in a cloud of scent and stolen sapphires, and said, without looking, "Mind the coal, girl." And I curtsied to her, because that is what I was now, and I said nothing at all. I had been very good, for 11 years, at saying nothing at all. You will want to know how a princess comes to carry coal, and I will tell you, but the order matters, because I learned it in pieces, and so should you. My father was the Prince of Adlerstein, which was a small place, and is now not a place at all. The great reshuffling of Europe folded it into something larger the year I turned 10, and my father, who had a daughter and a strongbox and no army, took both across the water to England, where an old friend had promised him safety. The friend was the Earl of Stannard. My father trusted him with the jewels, which were the whole of what our house had left, and with the secret of me, because a deposed prince's daughter is worth a ransom, or a marriage to the wrong sort of man, and he wished me kept quiet until the world steadied. The world did not steady. My father died in the second winter, of a cough and a grief that had no cure between them, and my mother followed within the year, and I was 11 and alone in a foreign country with a man who held everything I owned and had only to decide what to do with a child no one else knew existed. He decided to keep the jewels and lose the child. It is a simple crime when you think on it. He did not have to do anything cruel. He had only to stop. To let the quiet he had been asked to keep become a quiet that swallowed me. To place me, through 3 removes of housekeepers, into honest service under a plain name, and to let it be understood that the foreign girl was an orphan of no account, and to wait. A dead prince makes no inquiries. The jewels he kept were worth £40,000, and over 11 years he turned a slow trickle of them into the rise of his own house, until his daughter could wear the showpiece of the set to meet her duke, and no one in England knew the stones had ever belonged to anyone but the Earl of Stannard. He made one error, the way such men always make one error. He never found the ring. My mother had put it on its cord around my neck the last night of her life and told me to keep it against my skin and tell no one. And a child who has lost everything else does not lose the last warm thing her mother touched. I had carried it through 11 years and 4 households and into the service of the Duke of Cranleigh, where I carried coal up the long gallery and watched a thief's daughter wear my inheritance to her wedding, and I waited, as I had been taught to wait, for the world to steady. I did not yet know it was about to tilt instead. The Duke of Cranleigh was a man who had never, I think, done a single thing he had not first checked against a rule. I had been in his house a year, and I had watched him the way servants watch the people who own them, which is more closely than those people will ever believe. And what I had learned was this: He was correct. Not cold, correct. He stood as though a tutor had once set a book between his shoulder blades, and it had never come down. He had inherited young, and grief had set into him as duty, and somewhere along the way he had stopped being able to tell the difference between the thing he ought to do and the thing he wished to. He had chosen Lady Cecilia because she was suitable. I do not think the word happy had been allowed into the calculation. He noticed me once, before any of it. I was on the library steps, returning a book a guest had left, and I had forgotten myself and was reading the spine of another, and he came in and found a housemaid reading Latin. And for one moment the correctness slipped, and something underneath it looked out at me, startled and hungry, and ashamed of being hungry. "You read Latin?" he said. "No, Your Grace," I said, and put the book down. "I dust it." He looked at me a moment longer than a duke should look at a maid, and then he remembered the rule. And the rule said, a man betrothed does not look at the help. And the correctness came back down over his face like a visor, and he said, "Carry on," and left. But he had seen something, and so had I. I had seen the man inside the rule, the one who had wanted to keep talking to me about Latin and had not let himself. It is a particular cruelty to be a man who has caged the only part of himself worth loving and thrown away the key on principle. I told myself it meant nothing. A maid who lets a duke's loneliness mean something to her is a maid who has not been paying attention. But I caught him looking after that, in the careful way a man looks when he has forbidden himself to look. And I found, God help me, the coal-carrying princess found, that I looked back. The Dowager Duchess of Cranleigh arrived 3 days before the wedding, in a black carriage with a crest worn soft with age, and the whole house turned out in the great hall to receive her. I knew of her. The servants spoke of her with the particular awe reserved for the very old and the very grand. That she had been the beauty of 3 seasons. That she had been presented at half the courts of Europe before the wars closed them. That she had once been kissed on the hand by an emperor, and had not thought it the most interesting thing that happened to her that week. She had curtsied to kings. She was not a woman who curtsied lightly, and she had not, the servants said, approved of a single one of her son's decisions in 20 years. And they were all very curious to see what she made of the bride. I stood where housemaids stand, at the back, by the cold end of the hall, near the door to the service stair, holding myself still and small, my hand at the cord beneath my dress. And I watched the dowager come in on her stick, with her sharp old eyes going over the assembled house, like a general counting a battlefield. She greeted her son. She let her gaze move to Lady Cecilia, who sank into the deep, graceful curtsy she had no doubt practiced, the Adlerstein sapphires catching the light at her throat. And the dowager went very still. I saw it happen. I saw the old eyes fix on the jewels, and I saw something cross her face that was not approval, and was not disapproval, but was recognition, and very old, and very cold. She looked at the sapphires the way I had looked at them in the gallery. She knew them. Of course she knew them. She had curtsied at the courts where my grandmother wore them, before I was born, before the world folded my country into a footnote. She knew exactly what was hanging at the throat of the Earl of Stannard's daughter. And she knew, as I knew, that it had no business being there. Then her gaze left the jewels and went searching, past the bride, past her son, down the bright length of the hall to the cold end where the servants stood, and found me. I have wondered since what she saw. My mother's face, I think. I am told I have it. Or only a housemaid standing too straight, holding herself like someone who had once been taught how to enter a room, and had never quite unlearned it. Whatever she saw, it stopped her breath, and then it moved her, and the Dowager Duchess of Cranleigh, who had curtsied to kings, walked the whole length of her son's great hall, past the bride he had chosen, and stopped in front of the kitchen girl in the grey dress. And she curtsied to me. Deep and slow, and exactly correct. The curtsy one owes to royalty and to no one else. The whole house stopped breathing. "Your Serene Highness," the Dowager said, into a silence you could have struck like a bell. "Forgive an old woman her knees. I knew your grandmother. I should know that face anywhere. They told us you were dead." It is a strange thing to be made real in front of 40 people. I had been no one for so long that being someone felt like standing up too fast. The Duke crossed the hall to his mother in 3 strides, his correctness in ruins. "Mother, what in God's name?" "That girl," said the Dowager, not rising, her old knees holding the curtsy as a point of honour, "is Her Serene Highness the Princess Louisa of Adlerstein, and I will stake my name and my title on it, and you will help me to my feet, Sebastian, because I am 58 and the floor is cold." He raised her, white-faced. She turned to Lady Cecilia, and the warmth went out of her like a lamp turned down. "And those," she said, "are the Adlerstein sapphires, which I last saw on a living queen, and which a child of this house is wearing to a wedding. I should very much like to know how your father came by them, my dear. I should like the whole of England to know." I will not pretend I planned what I did next. I had carried the ring for 11 years against my skin, and never once taken it out where a soul could see it. Because the day I did was the day I stopped being safe, and being safe was the only inheritance Stannard had left me. But the Dowager had spent her one good knee on me, and the whole house was looking, and I was so tired, suddenly, of saying nothing at all. I drew the cord over my head and held out my mother's ring on my open palm. The single sapphire in old gold, the twin of the pendant at Cecilia's throat, the last warm thing my mother ever touched. "Yes," I said, the first word I had spoken above a servant's murmur in that house in a year, and it carried to the rafters. She knew my grandmother. The stone at Lady Cecilia's throat has a flaw shaped like a star. This one matches it. And inside this band is engraved a thing only my mother and I have ever read. And I will tell it to your magistrate, your grace, but not to this room, because some things are mine, and I have had so very little that was. The Duke of Cranleigh looked from the ring in my hand to the sapphires at his bride's throat, and I watched the rule he had lived his whole life inside crack down the middle. Because there is no rule for this, no book to check it against, and for the first time since I had known him, the man inside the cage stood in his own face with nothing over it. "Get the Earl of Stannard," he said to the room, very quietly. "Now." The hall emptied around the order, the way water leaves a tilted bowl. Footman went for the Earl, the housekeeper went to find the Dowager a chair. Lady Cecilia went, white and wordless, wherever a girl goes when the ground she stood on turns out to have been someone else's all along. And for a moment, in the wreck of his own great hall, the Duke of Cranleigh and I were as alone as 2 people can be in a house full of running feet. He looked at me as though he had never seen me, which, in a sense, he never had. I was still holding the ring on its cord, my whole life swinging from my fingers, and he crossed the space between us and stopped exactly 1 pace away, the correct distance, the distance a man leaves who has spent his life leaving correct distances, and I watched him fight it, the pace, the rule, the visor he had worn so long he had forgotten it was not his own face. "All this time," he said. His voice had gone low and unguarded, the library voice, the one he had let me hear once and not since. "You carried Latin up my stairs and a kingdom under your dress, and I called you the help and looked away, because the rule said to look away. I have spent my whole life looking away from the thing I wanted because a book told me to." He lifted his hand. For one unbearable moment, I was certain he meant to close the pace, to touch my face the way a man touches a thing he has finally decided to want. And the whole running, shouting house went silent in my ears, and I did not step back. God forgive me. I had been a servant for 11 years, and I knew exactly how far back to step, and I did not step back. "Tell me I have not ruined it," he said. "Tell me there is still a way to—" Then a door at the far end of the gallery opened, and the held breath went out of the air, and the visor came down over his face like a portcullis. They had found the Earl of Stannard. I heard his step in the passage beyond, unhurried, a man strolling to a card table he was sure of. The pace between us became a chasm again. Neither of us had crossed it. That, I would learn, was the whole of the next 3 days, the distance we did not close, and everything that lived inside it. I had thought, in my long years of waiting, that the truth would simply set me free. It does not. The truth is only a door. Someone still has to walk you through it, and there is always a man on the other side with his hand on the latch, pulling it shut. Stannard came in smiling. I will give him that. He had built his whole life on never once letting his face tell the truth, and even now, with the dowager's accusation hanging in the hall, he smiled at me the way you smile at a clever animal that has bitten you, with rue and not yet alarm. "A resemblance," he said, before anyone had asked him anything. "A sad, sad coincidence. Your Grace, this is precisely why one is careful with foreign orphans. They grow up on stories, poor things, and a pretty girl with a borrowed ring and a likeness to a portrait can quite turn an old woman's head." He inclined to the dowager with exquisite insolence. "Your Grace was at many courts. The years run together. It is no shame to mistake one dead princess for another." "I do not mistake jewels, my lord," said the dowager. "My jewels," said Stannard, "purchased lawfully, with papers I am happy to produce, from a dealer in Vienna in the year 12. As for the ring—" and here he turned to me, and the rue went out of his smile and left only the thing under it. "A maid in my friend's house, on the eve of his advantageous marriage, produces a trinket and a tail. I think we all know what that is. I think, Your Grace, you will find the kindest thing is to dismiss the girl quietly, before she does herself more harm, and proceed with the wedding, and let no more be said of stars in stones." And it nearly worked. That is the part no one tells you about the truth, that it can be true and proven and still lose if the man it indicts has rank and lawyers and 40 people who would rather have a wedding than a scandal. I felt the room begin to turn. I felt the comfortable, terrible relief moving through it, the wish to believe the smiling Earl and send the maid back down the service stair, because it was so much easier, and I had been easy to overlook for 11 years, and I could feel them all wanting to overlook me again. I had a choice then. I could put the ring back under my dress and go down the stair and be safe, as I had been safe, and let the wedding happen and the jewels stay stolen and the world stay unsteady. And I would have lost nothing I had not already lost. Or I could spend the last safe thing I owned. Your Grace. I turned to the Duke, and I did not curtsy, and I watched him notice that I did not. Stop. He had begun to say something, an apology, I think. The man was full of apologies he had no idea how to make. I did not want them. You did not put me in that kitchen, I said. Stannard did. And my own father trusted the wrong man with everything he loved, and neither of those is yours to be sorry for. I do not need your apology, Sebastian. I need to know what you will do now that you know. Tell me, and I will tell you whether you may stand beside me when I do it. I heard the name come out of me. His name, the plain one, that a maid has no right to, and a princess every right to. And I watched it land on him like a hand on the back of the neck. The whole room heard it. Lady Cecilia made a small sound. And the Duke of Cranleigh, who had spent 33 years choosing the suitable thing, looked at the unsuitable woman who had just used his name in front of his mother and his betrothed, and the man who held his marriage settlement, and he chose. I will not marry the daughter of a thief, he said. He said it to the room, clearly. The way you say a thing you mean to be unable to take back. The engagement is ended. Lady Cecilia, I am sorry. You are wearing your father's crime, and I do not believe you knew it. And I am sorry. He turned to Stannard, and the correctness that had been his cage all his life turned in that moment into something with teeth. And you, my lord, will not leave this house tonight a free man on the strength of a smile. There is a magistrate in this county who dines at my table. I think we will have him to breakfast. It cost him. I want that understood. He gave up the alliance, the settlement, the suitable future, the rule he had hidden inside since he was a boy. And he did it not knowing whether the woman he chose would have him, because I had not said I would, and I did not. Not then. A princess does not fall into a dupe's arms in gratitude. That is the old story, and I was finished with the old story. I made him wait, the way the world had made me wait, and he stood the waiting like a man, which was when I first let myself believe I might one day be glad of him. Stannard's last move came at midnight, and it was clever, and it nearly buried me. He did not flee, which I had expected. He went instead to the one weakness the truth always has, that it depends on the people who tell it. By morning, a letter had gone out from him to 3 of the county's loudest houses, and its substance was this: that the Dowager Duchess of Cranleigh, a woman of 58 whose memory all the world knew to be failing, had been imposed upon by a scheming servant, that the Duke, in a fit of romantic folly, had thrown over an honourable engagement for a kitchen maid's fairy tale, that there were papers, real papers, proving the sapphires honestly bought, and a portrait that any pretty foreigner might be coached to resemble, and that the kind and Christian course was to pity the poor Duke his lapse, and shun the adventuress who had caused it. He had reversed it. With a few sheets of paper, he had made the thief the victim, and the princess the fraud. And because he had rank and a daughter ruined, and a story that asked nothing of anyone but their laziness, it spread, and it grew. And by the time the magistrate came, it was no longer my word against Stannard's. It was my word against the comfortable wish of an entire county to be lied to. That night I went to the Duke and told him I would withdraw. I would go back to the service stair, or further, abroad, where no one knew me, and let the wedding be quietly mended or quietly forgotten, and spare his house the ruin of a fight it might not win. I told him it was the sensible course. I did not tell him I was afraid, that I had spent 11 years safe by being no one, and that to stand up in a magistrate's room and be called a liar to my face was the one thing left that I did not think I could survive. He heard the fear anyway. He had learned, that long, strange day, how to hear. No, he said. You told me to ask what I would do now that I know. I have done it. I broke everything that could be broken. Now I am asking you the same. You have carried that ring for 11 years, waiting for a world steady enough to claim it in. Princess, and he said the word without irony. The first man in England to say it to me and mean it. The world is never going to be steady. There is only ever the room you are in and whether you fill it. Stand up in the morning. I will be beside you, and I will not say a word, and I will let you do it. The magistrate's hearing was held in the long gallery, because half the county had invited itself, and there was nowhere else to put them. And I walked in, past the place where I had stopped with the coal-scuttle 11 days and 11 years before. And every head turned, and the word adventurous moved through the room like a draught under a door. I had spent my whole life letting other people decide what my silence meant. I decided, walking the length of that gallery, that I would tell them myself. I did not raise my voice. I had learned, in 11 years of being overheard by people who thought me deaf furniture, that the quietest voice in a room is the one everyone leans in to catch. I laid my ring on the table beside the parure, which the magistrate had required, and I let them see the 2 sapphires together, the star-floored stone and its twin, the same hand's work, the same dead jeweller's eye. My Lord Stannard says these were bought in Vienna in the year 12, I said. The Adlerstein parure was made in the year 1770 by a man named Brouwer for my great-grandmother, and it has never in its life been sold, because our house would have sold the roof first. He says I resemble a portrait. I do. It is a portrait of my mother, and I have her face because she gave it to me, along with this ring, on the last night of her life, when she was dying in a borrowed house, in a country that was not hers. And she put it around my neck and made me read what is written inside the band, so that I would never forget who I was, no matter how long I had to pretend. I picked up the ring. I did not look at Stannard. I looked at the magistrate. Inside this band is engraved, Du bist nicht allein. It means, you are not alone. My mother chose it because she knew she was leaving me alone, and it was the only lie she ever told me. And I have kept it 11 years to make it true. I set it down. There is no jeweller in Vienna who engraves a dying woman's promise to her daughter inside a stranger's ring, my lord. Open it. Read it. Then tell this room again that I am a story. The dowager rose then on her bad knees and told the room in her dry old voice what she had told it 3 days before, only longer, with names and dates, and the colour of the gown my grandmother had worn the night she last saw the full parure, the kind of detail no coaching invents and no failing memory holds by accident. And the Duke's man of law laid out, beside it, the quiet matter of where the Earl of Stannard's fortune had actually come from. A slow 11-year trickle of single great stones appearing in the markets of 3 cities, each one matched, when you cared to look, to a gap in a set that a Vienna receipt could not explain. Stannard rose and protested, and his voice climbed and cracked, and the more he filled that appalled and listening silence, the guiltier the sound of him became, until even the people who had wanted so badly to be lied to could not go on pretending they were deaf. I had given them the truth in a voice they had to lean in to hear, and a man who shouts in a leaning-in room has already lost it. You took my name and my mother's jewels, and 11 years of my life, I said, when his noise had finally run out. And I want you to know that the thing you cannot give back is the smallest of them. The years are gone. I have made my peace with the years. But you will return the parure to its rightful house, and you will answer to the law for the having of it. And you will do it in front of the people whose good opinion you stole, along with everything else. Because I find, my lord, that I am done being merciful with my silence. I have a great deal to say. and 11 years' practice at choosing exactly when to say it. I felt the Duke beside me. He had stood there the whole while and said not a word, as he promised, and let me, which I have come to understand was the hardest thing a man so full of rules had ever done. To stand in a room and want to fix it, and instead let the woman he loved fix it herself. When it was finished, and Stannard was being walked from the gallery by men who no longer smiled back at his smile, the Duke of Cranleigh turned to me, in front of the whole leaning, breathless county, and waited to be told whether he might speak. "Say something," I said. "Will you have me?" he said. "Not as a rescue. God knows you needed no rescuing. I have never in my life seen anyone need less. As a man who spent 33 years choosing the correct thing, and would like, just once, before he dies, to choose the right one. I have nothing to recommend me, but that I will never again mistake quiet for empty, and that I love you, and that I let you, which I am told is the rarest gift a man like me has to give." I had spent 11 years waiting for the world to be steady enough to claim what was mine. I understood, looking at him, that he was the first thing I had ever wanted that was not owed to me, that no one had stolen, and no one need restore, that I might simply choose, the way a free woman chooses, because she wishes to. "Yes," I said, "I find I will." He kissed me in the long gallery in front of the whole county, which is precisely the sort of thing that ruins a woman, and I had been ruined that morning by an expert and acquitted by lunch, so it could do no further harm. And I let it instead make me, for the first time in 11 years, loud. We were married in the spring, when the county had finished talking and started, in the way of counties, to claim it had been on my side all along. I wore the parure. It came home to me in a velvet case the magistrates' men carried up the very stair I had carried coal down, and I set my mother's ring among the sapphires where it had always belonged, the star-floored stone and its 11 years parted twin reunited at last. And then I took the ring out again and put it on my own hand, where I wear it still, because a thing can be restored to its place and still be the place itself for someone. And that ring had been my whole country for 11 years, and I was not about to lock my country in a case. The Earl of Stannard did not go to Vienna in the end, though I am told he often spoke of it. The theft was proven from his own stones. He was stripped of the fortune he had built on a dead prince's trust, and he removed himself to the continent before the worst of the talk, where he is said to advise other Englishmen on the safekeeping of their valuables, which strikes me as the one honest position he was ever fitted for. Lady Cecilia, who truly had not known, came to me before she left, and gave me, with shaking hands, the last loose pendant her father had ever fastened on her. And I took it. And I have never told her that I forgave her the moment I saw her face go white in that hall. Because some kindnesses are better left as debts the giver does not know are paid. There is a mourning I keep. It is the spring after, and the Dowager has come to stay, and she is teaching my husband, with enormous patience and no mercy at all, how to sit in a quiet room and not fill it. And Sebastian is trying. He is genuinely trying, and failing, and reaching instead for my hand at the breakfast table, and turning the ring on my finger with his thumb, around and around, the way I used to do under my dress when it was the only thing I had. "You are very quiet this morning, Your Serene Highness," he said. "Yes," I said. And we sat in it together. The silence that had once been my hiding place and his cage, and was now neither. Only the warm room where the truest things wait until you are brave enough and free enough to say them out loud. I had spent my life certain that the safest thing a girl could own was her own silence, and the most precious thing a girl could keep was the ring no one knew she had. I had been wrong about both. The most precious thing was the moment I stopped keeping it, and chose, at last, to be seen.